Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I'm sorry. Kazuo Ishiguro. I should have made sure I pronounced that correctly before I started the video. But it's a novel, came out in 2005. And I believe it's a 7th or 8th novel. It's my first ever hearing, but I did hear about the novel quite some time ago, maybe a few years back. I did hear it showing up, like, kind of in the kind of blend between romance and speculative fiction. And I also heard about the film by Mark Romerick, I think, who's famous for doing a lot of music videos, I think, for like Fiona Apple, I think, and like 9 Inch Nails, I believe. I could be mixing it up with a different person, but I think it was either him or Andrew Nichols, I think. But either way, it had I'm totally blanking on her name. Andrew Garfield and Carey Mulligan in it, and but yeah. Anyway, before I get tongue-tied anymore, it's basically, so it's set in this fictional village. It's described as like science fiction, but it's actually pretty. It's more of like a romance, not more like a corny romance. It's like pretty. It's existential. There's a big undertones of, like the human life, like authenticity, creativity, like being, circumstance, being born into to something like a place like Hailshorn. So it's set in this place called Hailshorn, England, and right off the bat, it's narrated by Kathy H. She introduces herself as, and she's in her early 30s at this point, and she's kind of looking back at her life as a carer, and she starts describing what it's like to be a carer. So she's talking a lot of times. It's like she feels like she's sometimes like she feels like happy and like she's being of some use, and that she's like actually nurturing and calming people before their final moments, because you're actually kind of given this thing. You're kind of like not thrust messily, but kind of you're not really described. You're kind of like, you are kind of pushed into the middle of these things, like without really understanding like what's going on. And that's probably a good reason, because it actually was more effective when you kind of revealed the fact that she starts, Kathy H starts from her point of view, kind of in a monologue, kind of recalling memoir kind of fashion. And yeah, she's talking about what it's like caring for her friends, and I think she describes like caring for Ruth and her friend Tommy, and there's a lot of kind of emotional burden too, because she like very much loves these two people, and you're like wondering what kind of connection, why, like there's definitely some history between these three characters that you're like, it's very palpable right away, and like you're kind of like, from that moment when Ishiguro like introduces all three of them, and kind of like you're actually, I was eager to kind of find out what happens next. So she flashed backwards in time about to her childhood, pretty much as far back as she can remember, and she starts saying that she was the reason she's a carer and how she came about all this stuff in Hailshorn, and she was born into Hailshorn, which is basically this kind of picturesque. I imagine it to be a picturesque, very clean and sanitary, very almost too good to be true kind of village that raises these that like almost like a preparatory school, like for basically what it is, that kind of gears towards like young people's development and trying to get them ready for life, and slowly you're peeling back the layers of this story in kind of a sad truth fashion, of trying to get at like what's going on, and more. So you're introduced to Kathy and her best friend, female best friend at least, Ruth, they bond over certain things, and they bond over certain like things. And Ruth is very outgoing and kind of is a foil a bit to Kathy, who's more like bookish, and they both are she says right off the bat that Tommy, this boy, makes an effect on her because he's very uncreative and very which you wouldn't think is like a big deal in any other place. It's the kind of part that's a tiny bit funny, just because it's like in any other place this actually wouldn't be bad whatsoever, not being creative in a sense, or at least most other places. But like in Hailstorm, it's very, it means a lot because what they have I don't know if it's every year, every month, they have semi-frequent art shows where all the kids start putting together all their accumulated artworks that they've combined in a portfolio, and they're like, these are going to be the best, out of the best candidates who have the most potential, we're going to, in skill, we're going to try to, most precocious among us, we're going to try to, well, I guess the status quo at that point, because everybody's kind of precocious, you're like, you're kind of, it kind of changes the context, I guess, but whoever wins it, like, they get a chance of actually getting out of Hailstorm, and which might not mean much, but I don't think they actually say that right off the bat. But there's a lot of rumors floating around about what the art shows are about, and everybody's kind of eager to do good on them. And Tommy's very angry, and he throws a lot of fits, and not just kind of hissy fits. He's just a confused young guy, and I kind of felt for his pain in a lot of ways, because he doesn't know how to direct this passion healthily, and he gets bullied a lot for it, and and it's right at the bat, Tommy and Kathy form a bond, and I think later on there's this one of the main main kind of overseers of Hailstorm, Miss Lucy, who oversees the children. She says something like to Tommy about not being so good at, like, it's okay not to be so good at art. It's you can find your calling in a different area of life. Not everybody's destined for that kind of thing. And so flash forward a little bit of time, and as they grow up, it's kind of shows like Kathy H does go kind of the totality of her life from then up until now, kind of, and so her and Ruth, they go off, and there's like this kind of sublet kind of place that they go to, which is still kind of in the vicinity of Hailstorm, but they're sent off there, might be a few hours away or something, and it's where all the young adults and teens, and they're all kind of put off in these places, and they go off and they start dating, and they start oh, and I forgot to mention, sorry, they actually revealed that, I think Miss Lucy says, and there's also this Madam character, I think her Madame Miro or something. She's a very mysterious and closely guarded kind of character that of foreign descent. We're not really sure. It's not really, it's never really resolved where she's from. But she's definitely not from Hailstorm. She's from overseas, in some capacity. So she shows up, and she's very she's very curt, and this makes an effect on them, because she looks at them as if, and Kathy describes it as if they're these feral creatures, like as if they were, like she looks at the kids, and because all they're doing is like just being kids. They're trying to like kind of bind together and kind of play a little trick on her, in good fun, and try to shake her up just a little bit, just to get her out of her shell. And she's like just completely she doesn't, she's not angry. She's not an angry person. She's just very confused, and she looks at them as, I think, as if one would look upon like a roach or something, like, and that's at the point you kind of get the sense that something's like a little bit wrong, and you're like dying to figure out, or at least I was, and I guess that's what the novel, Ishiguro is doing a really great job unfolding these tiny little threads in the narrative to kind of indicate that something is kind of bubbling underneath the surface. So yeah, so they go off, and Miss Lucy, also when they're still kind of in their youth, tells them the big secret, which is why, like why they're in Hailstorm, why they given these tests and these art exam type of shows, and they're constantly tested on their intelligence and their faculties and all that. And she says that they're basically clones. That all the kids that were born there are actually from a DNA that's been, I'm not sure the kind of genetics of it, but it's, they've been duplicated. They're not they're not true. They're actually taken kind of from the excess of like different kind of superior, not superior, but like that's kind of what the Hailshore students get. They kind of get this thing, like Kathy H and Ruth. They all feel very like horrible, like just like as if they're just like these kind of throwaway, castaway things that like nobody should ever look at, jettison things. But that's not the case, I think, because they're made to be donors. Like each and every one of them is made to be a future donor of their organs. So, because in this form of reality, and it's not really set in its distinct timeline, I don't think. You kind of get the sense that it could be just as well. I think maybe it mentions it's like it could have just well been like in the 70s or 80s, I think, like, but in a different timeline, I think. And I think Ishiguro goes into that a little bit more, where he's unfolding, unraveling a little bit more of those kind of details, like just to give it says the timeline. It's like as if it could be in this like not too far post World War II, but like as if maybe World War II, if World War II ended in just a completely different way, and like determined all kinds of different scenarios that are unlike the ones that we see today. So basically, yeah, they go off to this kind of island area, kind of where they can kind of almost like a retreat, but it's a kind of coming of age kind of thing for all the Hailstorm students, because they're that's where they're kind of bonding, and that's where they also kind of fall in love. That's where Kathy finds her first boyfriend, and she kind of, it doesn't work out, like and then there's another moment where she's falls for Tommy. But the thing is, what happens with Tommy is that Tommy and Ruth actually end up together in a relationship that seems kind of like a farce. Like I think it's kind of like destined not to be, but it's kind of like what I think it's like, because the everyone else in Hailstorm was kind of, or her peers were kind of pointing it in the direction to make it seem as if Tommy was just meant for, that's a lot what happens, is like a lot of their lives are just determined right from the get-go. It's like, nope, Tommy belongs with this person, with Ruth. Kathy belongs with Roland or whatever his name is. Like, it's like that, but what happens is actually Tommy inevitably ends up falling for for Kathy, because they have just a better bond. That's whereas you get the sense with Ruth and Tommy that it's kind of like there's not, the chemistry there is kind of like it's kind of forced, or it's kind of contrived, but yeah, that creates a certain tension. And it's also a time when Kathy, well, actually this is earlier, but it's I figured it's the namesake of the book, but Kathy H falls in love with this CD that she's given, well, not a CD, but a kind of vinyl record she's given, or no, a tape. It's actually a tape. That's what it's a cassette tape. That's a Judy. It's by the name of this artist named Judy Bridgewater, and it's kind of a little bit of a lounge kind of cabaret, the way Ishiguro describes it, as being like with a cigarette in hand, and the movie actually did a pretty good job of that, recreating like how I think like that song would sound. And it's called Never Let Me Go, obviously, and it's not like emblem of musicianship or like virtuosity or in particular, but it's more of a seminal moment of just like a Proustian kind of falling in love, that kind of love at first sight, that nostalgia, that memory, fondness for memory, that predilection that we get for certain moments that unfold, that kind of like imprint themselves on our subconscious and conscious, just kind of always there. And I'll be damned if I think don't if every one of us, including myself, hasn't had a moment like that, just falling in love with the simplicity of music, or art in general, or just and I think this song is something she goes back to and actually plays. It actually plays a pretty maybe not pivotal part in the sense that it's but in a happenstance kind of serendipitous part, it does play a pretty big part in Kathy H's life. When later on she stumbles on it when she's in the this kind of on that kind of youth retreat with her as a young adult, and she actually finds it by happenstance in a like a used, I think, vintage like antique store, I believe, and she stumbles upon it and she's like, whoa. So yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. And yeah, there's that I think finally Ruth and Tommy break up, and I think Kathy finally gets to be able to be with Tommy, and there's a few moments of kind of awkwardness where Tommy is looking at magazines of girls, of kind of maybe more erotic kind of magazines, and they're showing girls, and I think it's Kathy is very like both curious and like, but also like disgusted by at the same time, because she sees like those women, like they're like, and she understands that they're not clones, and that they're like, she wonders like what her mother might have been like, if she might have been like, was her mother just one of those like a kind of throwaway kind of girl that would have been in I think like a magazine like that, like a kind of throwaway. She imagines her mother might have been like that if she knew her at all, and that's like a moment kind of self-reflection, and kind of it's bitter because you're very. It's like one of those things where it's like you don't know how to kind of put together the puzzle pieces of the past and to kind of reconcile that with this future, because you're like they literally don't. I mean, it's like you think about it, they're the organ donor kind of thing. They're all gonna. Some people are just destined. That's how they set it up. Like they're destined to be, for the sake of. It's like in a weird utilitarian fashion. For the sake of the common good, everybody's gonna get a chance to be an organ donor. It's almost like the organ donors on a driver's license kind of thing, but it's like taken to its like an extreme logical conclusion of just like, yeah, just harvest everybody's organs as soon as we can, get them to those people who need them right away. And yeah, it's like it's pretty depressing, and it's like that kind of puts a damper on their whole entire life, because it's like if you just like gave them these happy existences and you didn't tell them the truth, then it would just be like everything would just never make sense. So it's like you kind of understand why Miss Lucy told them from a pretty young age to, the truth, because it would have just finally in the classic kind of biblical sense, truth does set people free in a way. It dissolves you of this burden of just trying to hide and skirt things on everything under the surface, and that's what happens. Like they're trying to uncover and find out what is going on, and they end up in their early 20s, and this is getting closer to kind of and to the present day of Kathy H and all her friends, and they all with Kathy and Tommy together now. I'm sorry, Kathy and I got that right this time, and Ruth. They also try to figure out what, with Miss Lucy, and they try to visit her in her neighborhood, and they're tracking her down, and they finally managed to find her, and she's Madam opens the door because she's still with tending to, I guess, Miss Lucy's needs, and she's just and this time she's not that same look, but she's more understanding this time and less bewildered, but she still is taken aback that they've been able to track her down, and they basically, Miss Lucy tells them, it's like, I tried to be as upfront as I could, like I tried to be, like and it's this thing where it's like in this kind of timeline, in this kind of really bizarre, just horrible kind of thing where your life is just like you're set up, it's already determined, and there's no, your fate is completely out of your hands. It's like in that kind of timeline, there's like no, I kind of see Miss Lucy as doing her best with what she has. Like she's really, there's nothing else that she can do. She's like, she's like very, proud about how they turned out. They're very, like even Tommy, she's like all of them turn out to be respectable and intelligent, but it's just like nothing can take away that sting of, so yeah, there's towards the end, I think there's one, excuse my cat is somewhere doing crazy things, but yeah, towards the end there's a moment that I stuck with me too, with Tommy when he's just screaming in outrage again, but it's in a rare moment because he really hasn't shown that kind of turbulent kind of emotion since he was a kid, and he's kind of become more of a kind of sulkier kind of teenager, but then he all of a sudden he just comes and lets it out, and it just comes, and you're just like, it's just all this, this kind of, like everything just comes out, like that's been building up all that time. It's just kind of in a kind of a strange satisfactory way, that things sometimes, like a well-channeled, well-deserved kind of a yell at something or screaming, can really tell a lot. It speaks louder than kind of just ranting or raving, or holding it in, definitely. But yeah, it's like just a reaction to everything that's happened thus far. Tommy is, he's gonna die, and I think his organs are going to be, he's at that time in his life up until his 30s, that's when that's when it's going to happen. And Kathy H is stays by his side, and there's, can't say there's not a happy ending, because it's like they've come to peace with their destinies, and in a strange way it's like it's bittersweet maybe. I mean, yeah, it could, you could just be like, whoa, and the whole, I guess, utilitarian weird aspect of it, and philosophically, I guess you could argue outside of a box and be like, well, just this aspect of the world is just screwed up, and it shouldn't be like this, and maybe that's right, but I mean, within the context and the confines of this Hailstorm space, it's like you get, which is quite cozy, I might say. It's like it's a weird kind of thing, like it's this like Stockholm effect almost, like it's like everything's so cozy and everybody's so nice, but everything's a little bit too pleasant or picturesque. So yeah, let me know what you think. Never let me go. I'd like to read more of Ishiguro, and yeah, definitely recommend this, and yeah, let me know what you think, and see you in the next one.